Welcome to Read and Rise. Today's book will be by Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. The main theme of this book is doing well with money isn't about what you know, it's about how you behave. Deemed by Jason Zweig of Wall Street Journal as one of the best and original finance books in years. Timeless lessons on wealth, greed, and happiness. For my parents who teach me. Gretchen, who guides me. Miles and Reese, who inspire me. Napoleon once said, "A genius is a man who can do average things when everyone else around him is losing his mind." Sherlock Holmes once said, "The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes." Introduction. I spent my college years working as a valet at a luxury hotel in Los Angeles. One of my frequent guests was a tech executive. He was a genius. He had patented part of the Wi-Fi technology we all use today. He sold companies, made millions, and yet he behaved like a child when it came to money. He carried bricks of $100 bills. He showed them off, drunk, loud, unprompted. One day he sent someone to buy $1,000 gold coins, just so he and his friends could skip them across the ocean, laughing as they sank into the waves, not long after he was broke. This story is not about intelligence, it's about behavior. And that's the premise of this book. Doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are, and a lot to do with how you behave. Now, contrast that tech genius with Ronald Reed, a janitor from rural Vermont. First in his family to finish high school, he worked at gas stations, swept floors, lived modestly, chopped firewood for fun. When he died at 92, he left $8 million behind. No inheritance, no lottery, no secrets. He simply saved what little he could, invested in blue-chip stocks, and waited. Decades later, he was a millionaire philanthropist. Just months before Reed's passing, another man made headlines. Richard Foscone, a Harvard MBA, high-ranking Merrill Lynch executive. He had everything: education, money, prestige. He retired early, bought a mansion with 11 bathrooms and 7 garages. But he borrowed too much. The 2008 crisis hit, and just like that, he was bankrupt. His mansion sold in a foreclosure auction. 2 men, 2 lives, 1 truth. Patience and humility can outperform brilliance and arrogance. This doesn't happen in other fields. You won't find a janitor performing surgery better than a Harvard doctor, or designing buildings better than elite architects. But in investing, it happens all the time. Why? Because money isn't hard science, it's soft skill. And soft skill is the psychology of money. This book will not bombard you with numbers. It won't teach you how to pick stocks or time markets. It will share 20 short, powerful stories. Stories that show how human behavior, not IQ, not Excel skills, shapes your financial future. Finance is usually taught like physics. Here's a formula. Just follow it. But in real life, emotions get in the way. Fear, greed, pride, anxiety. They mess with the math. We know what we're supposed to do, but doing it, especially when life gets hard, that's the challenge. 2 things affect every person on this planet: health and money. And while modern science has helped us live longer, we're struggling to understand how to live better with money. So if you ever felt confused, overwhelmed, or uncertain about money, you're not alone. This book is for you. Short chapters, big lessons, stories that stick, ideas that challenge. Let's begin. Chapter 1. No one's crazy. Your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.00000% of what's happened in the world, but 80% of how you think the world works. Let me tell you about a problem, one that might just make you feel better about how you manage your money and help you judge others a little less for how they manage theirs. Here it is. People do some crazy things with money. But no one is actually crazy, not when you zoom out and see where they're coming from. Each of us grows up with a different lens, different parents, different incomes, different values. Some are born into inflation, others into booming markets. Some into poverty, others into privilege. We carry all of that with us, into every money decision we make. And here's the truth. What you've lived through feels far more real than what you've read about. So we form deeply personal and widely different beliefs about money. That's why what seems crazy to you might make perfect sense to me. A kid raised in a wealthy suburb doesn't fear risk the same way someone raised in scarcity does. Someone who lived through the Great Depression fears investing differently than someone who came from of age in the tech boom. The Australian who hasn't seen a recession in 30 years sees the economy through a lens most Americans never will. Even how we interpret inflation, recessions, or unemployment, it all comes down to what we've lived through or what we've studied. Our worldview is built not from facts but feelings. Here's a striking example. When JFK was asked what he remembered from the Great Depression, he said, "I have no first-hand knowledge. My family had one of the great fortunes of the world. We traveled more, had bigger houses, more servants." To him, the Depression wasn't real. It was just something he read about at Harvard. Now imagine being asked to run the economy when you've never felt economic hardship. Different experiences create different realities and often different blind spots. You can study a market crash, you can memorize the statistics, you can quote the history books, but you will never truly understand the feel of it until you've lived through one, until you've sat at a dinner table staring at your children, wondering if your money mistakes might shape their future. As investor Michael Batnick put it, some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood, and that's something every spreadsheet in the world can't calculate. In 2006, economists Ulrich Maldemer and Stefan Nagel studied 50 years of financial data. They found that our investment decisions are heavily shaped by the era we came of age in. People who grew up during inflation tend to avoid bonds later in life. Those raised in strong stock markets invest more in stocks. It wasn't about intelligence, not education, not strategy. It was about timing, just when and where you were born. Take Bill Gross, the famous bond investor. In a 2019 interview, he admitted he likely wouldn't be who he is today if he were born in a decade earlier or later. He just happened to build his career during a golden era for bonds. To him, bonds were a gold mine. But his father's generation, battered by inflation, bonds were financial quicksand. Same investments, different experiences, completely different conclusions. Even people who look alike on paper, same profession, same background, can hold opposite beliefs. If you were born in 1970, the SP 500 soured during your 20s, but if you were born in 1950, it went nowhere during yours. Once one generation trusts the market, the other remains cautious for life. Let's talk about lottery tickets. Did you know Americans spend more on lotto tickets than movies, music, sports, video games, and books combined? It's mostly the poorest households buying them. The same people who say they can't come up with $400 in an emergency are spending that much every year on a 1 in a million shot at hitting it big. Seems crazy, right? But let's take a step back. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, if vacations, new cars, safe neighborhoods, and college for your kids feel impossible, then buying a lottery ticket isn't just about winning money, it's about buying hope. A tiny, tangible piece of a dream. To them, it's not crazy, it's normal. It's something in a life that feels like it offers very little. You don't have to agree with that logic, you don't have to endorse it, but maybe you can understand it. And that small shift in perspective changes everything. Most financial decisions aren't made on calculators. They're made at kitchen tables, in offices, under pressure, in fear, in hope, in uncertainty. They're shaped by ego, pride, culture, marketing, and above all, experience. So before you call someone's money choices crazy, remember this. Everyone has their reasons, even if you don't see them. Now here's another layer to this. We're all still new to this money thing. Saving, investing, retirement. These are modern ideas. The 401k didn't even exist until 1978. The Roth IRA is barely old enough to drink. Private pensions were never widespread. Before World War II, most people worked until they died. So it's no surprise we fumble with student loans, with retirement plans, with credit. We're all just figuring it out. Dogs were domesticated 10,000 years ago and still have wild instincts. Meanwhile, we've had only a few decades of experience navigating the modern financial system. We're not crazy. We're inexperienced. We're human. We make money decisions based on our own sliver of reality, believing they make sense because in that moment they do. That's why when it comes to money, no one's crazy. Chapter 2. Luck, risk. Nothing is good or as bad as it seems. Luck and risk, they're siblings. Invisible forces, uninvited guests, constant companions. Both remind us that no matter how much effort, planning, or genius we bring to the table, outcomes are never entirely in our control. Take Bill Gates, a household name, a tech titan, a brilliant mind, no doubt, but rewind to 1968. He's a 13-year-old boy who just happens to attend one of the only high schools in the world with a computer. Lakeside School, Seattle. Why did Lakeside have a computer? Because a forward-thinking math teacher petitioned the school's mother's club to spend $3,000 of rummage sale money to lease a teletype computer. A rare visionary move. That decision gave Gates access to something most universities didn't have. And he wasn't alone. Paul Allen, another Lakeside student, shared the same passion. The two would meet after school, staying up late, playing with code, experimenting, dreaming. It was the origin story of Microsoft. 1 in a million odds, literally, out of 303 million high school-aged people in the world, about 300 were at Lakeside. One of them was Bill Gates. Luck? Yes, but don't mistake that for disrespect. Gates himself admitted if there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. But here's the twist. Gates and Allen weren't the only prodigies at Lakeside. There was a third, Kent Evans, Gates' best friend, brilliant, driven, a born leader. He and Gates were already building scheduling software for the school. Still in their teens, they had plans, big ones. But Ken Evans never made it past high school. He died in a mountaineering accident. Gone, just like that. 1 in a million odds, again. Same age, same talent, same ambition. One got luck, the other got risk. Two sides of the same coin. That's the whole point. Outcomes are really fair reflections of effort. The world is too complex for that. There are 7 billion people, each with their own story, each part of a network of infinite moving parts. Luck and risk lurk in all of them. But here's where things get dangerous. We're not good at acknowledging either. We praise success as if it was entirely earned. We blame failure as if it were entirely deserved. But that's an illusion, one that can mislead, confuse, even harm. Ask Nobel laureate Robert Shiller what he most wants to understand about investing. His answer: the exact role of luck in successful outcomes. Why? Because we know it matters, but we're uncomfortable with admitting it. Say someone becomes a billionaire investor. Could it have been sheer luck? Of course, but tell that to their face and you sound better. Judge your own success as luck. It feels demoralizing. So we simplify. We make up neat stories, easy answers. And what about failure? We often label it laziness, poor planning, bad decisions. But maybe it was just risk doing its thing. Maybe a smart investment just landed in the unlucky 20%. Maybe a startup with a brilliant leadership got crushed by a freak market shift. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes good decisions fail, bad ones succeed. No one celebrates the investor who did everything right but lost money. Yet Forbes will happily feature a reckless trader who hit the jackpot. Same coin, different flip. That's the real danger. When we try to learn from success and failure without acknowledging luck and risk, we take away the wrong lessons. Want an example? Cornelius Vanderbilt, railroad magnate, titan of the 1800s. After a string of illegal deals, an advisor pointed out that he'd broken the law. Vanderbilt shrugged it off. You don't suppose you can run a railroad in accordance with the statuses of state of New York, do you? Was he a visionary or a criminal? It depends on the outcome. Same with Rockefeller. Brilliant? Yes. Ruthless? Also yes. His company was once called no better than a common thief, but history sees him as a genius. Why? Because they got away with it. Had they failed, we'd be telling a cautionary tale instead of a success story. So how do we avoid being fooled by these stories? Housel gives 2 pieces of advice. Be careful with who you admire or criticize. Outcomes don't always reflect effort or ethics. Focus on broad patterns, not individuals. The more extreme the example, the less relevant it might be in your own life. Trying to replicate Warren Buffett's exact success, that's a trap. His results are so exceptional. Luck had to play a big role, but patterns, like the importance of patience or avoiding unnecessary risk, those are transferable. In the end, success is a lousy teacher. It convinces us we're bulletproof. It seduces us into thinking our past wins guarantee future ones. And failure, it's just as bad as it can trick us into thinking we're failures too. But if we understand the roles of luck and risk, really respect them, we can be a little wiser, a little more forgiving, a little less quick to judge. Nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. Chapter 3. Never enough. When rich people do crazy things. John Bogle, the legendary founder of Vanguard, once shared a simple but profound story about money. At a party hosted by a billionaire, the author, Kurt Vonnegut, tells his friend Joseph Hallett that their host, a hedge fund manager, made more money in one day than Hallett did from his famous novel, Catch-22. Hallett responds without hesitation, yes, but I have something you will never have. Enough. That word enough sits at the very center of our relationship with money. It's a concept that's often missing in modern life. We chase more wealth, more power, more validation, without ever asking, when will it be enough? Let's look at 2 powerful examples, Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff. Gupta was born in poverty in Kolkata. He had nothing, no wealth, no privilege, but he rose against all odds. He became the CEO of McKinsey, sat on major boards, worked alongside Bill Gates, and had a net worth of over $100 million. But it wasn't enough. So when he sat on Goldman Sachs' board and heard that Warren Buffett would invest $5 billion into the bank, he couldn't resist. 16 seconds after learning the news, he picked up the phone and passed this insider information to a hedge fund manager. The result, millions in profit, and Gupta went to prison. Then there's Bernie Madoff, the most infamous Ponzi schemer in modern history. Before the fraud, Madoff was a legit financial superstar. His firm processed nearly 10% of NYSE trading volume. He was already wealthy, legitimately wealthy. But again, he wanted more. He paid the ultimate price. So the question is, why do people with more money than they could ever need throw it all away for even more? The answer is simple. They didn't understand enough. Let's be real. Most of us will never be in Gupta or Madoff's shoes, but almost everyone will, at some point, earn enough to live comfortably, to meet their needs, to enjoy some of their wants. Still, many won't feel satisfied. Why? Because the goalpost keeps moving. Lesson 1. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. As your income grows, so do your expectations. That's where ambition can become a trap. Warren Buffett once said, to make money they didn't have and didn't need, they risk what they did have and did need. That's foolish. Lesson 2. Social comparison is poison. A rookie baseball player making $500,000 a year should feel rich, but next to someone like Mike Trout, who earns $36 million a year, he feels poor. Mike Trout might compare himself to a hedge fund manager making $340 million, and that manager compares himself to the likes of Warren Buffett, who could be looking up at Jeff Bezos. It never ends. The only way to win the game of comparison is not to play. Lesson 3. Enough is not about settling. It's about limiting your potential. It's about avoiding regret. Just like overeating leads to sickness, overreaching in money, business, or life can lead to disaster, burnout, broken relationships, or worse. Lesson 4. Some things are never worth risking, no matter the reward. Reputation, freedom, independence, love, health, peace of mind. These are priceless. And chasing more at their expense is a game no one wins. In the end, the psychology of money begins with a powerful truth. Understanding what enough looks like in your life is the foundation of financial wisdom. It's not about how much you have, it's about how much you need and knowing when that's enough. Chapter 4. Confounding, Compounding. $81.5 billion of Warren Buffett's $84.5 billion net worth came after his 65th birthday. Our minds are not built to handle such. Let's begin with something that has nothing to do with money. Ice ages. For centuries, no one fully understood what caused them. Enormous geological forces were suspected. Mountains rising, volcanoes erupting. But in truth, the cause was far smaller and subtler. A slight shift in Earth's orbit, a small tilt that allowed just a little more snow to stick around after summer. That snow reflected more sunlight, making winters colder, and before long what started as a thin layer became a mild, thick glacier. This is the quiet power of compounding. The smallest changes, barely noticeable, can build upon themselves until they change the entire world. That's the lesson Housel wants us to take to heart. Money works the same way. Take Warren Buffett. Everyone talks about his genius as an investor, but few highlight the real secret to his $84.5 billion fortune time. He started investing at age 10. By age 30, he had $1 million. But here's the twist. $84.2 billion of his wealth came after his 50th birthday. Let that sink in. Now imagine if Buffett had started investing at 30 instead of 10 and retired at 60. Even with the same investment skills, his net worth would be around $11.9 million, not $84 billion. That's a 99.9% difference. The takeaway, time matters more than brilliance. Compare that to Jim Simons, a genius investor who outperformed Buffett in annual returns, achieving a mind-blowing 66% per year, but he started much later, in his 50s. Even with such returns, Simons is worth less than Buffett because he had less time to let compounding work. That's the real magic. Longevity plus consistency beat intensity. We're hardwired to think in straight lines. If I ask you to add 8 9 times, you get 72 simple, but multiply 8 by itself 9 times, and you get a number over 134 million. That's exponential growth. That's how compounding works, but it's not how we think. From 1950 to 1990, storage technology improved slowly from a few megabytes to a few hundred, but then, boom, in the next 30 years, it exploded to 100 million megabytes. That's compounding in action. Even tech visionaries like Bill Gates once underestimated its power. In 2004, he questioned why Gmail users would ever need 1 gigabyte of email storage. But today that's barely enough to hold a few weeks' worth of photos. Compounding always looks boring at first, then suddenly it looks miraculous. And that's the mistake many investors make. They chase high returns, looking for one big hit, but real wealth comes from good enough returns held for the longest time possible. That's when the compounding takes over. That's when it becomes unstoppable. In truth, the most valuable investing strategy isn't glamorous. It isn't thrilling. It's not even complex. It's simple. Shut up and wait. Let that line echo as you reflect on this chapter. Wealth doesn't need to be chased. It needs to be built, layer by layer, year by year, like snow becoming a glacier. And in the next chapter, we'll see what happens when that patient power is ignored. Chapter 5. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. There are a million ways to get rich. Books, strategies, role models galore. But when it comes to staying rich, that's a different story. And that story begins with frugality and paranoia. Two traits we rarely glamorize, yet they're critical to a long-term financial success. To understand why, let's go back nearly a century and meet two men, Jesse Livermore and Abram Jaminsky. Jesse was a trading legend. By the age of 30, he was worth the modern-day equivalent of $100 million. During the stock market crash of 1929, while panic swept Wall Street, Livermore shorted the market and made over $3 billion in today's dollars in a single day. His family was ready to grieve, thinking they were ruined. Instead, they were richer than ever. Meanwhile, Abram Jaminsky, a real estate mogul, lost everything in the crash. He disappeared, possibly taking his own life. Same event, opposite outcomes. But fast forward just a few years, and Livermore's story spirals too. Fueled by overconfidence, he made bigger, riskier bets, lost everything, and eventually died by suicide. Despite massive success, neither man had the mindset to preserve their wealth. What does this teach us? Getting rich and staying rich are two totally different skills. Getting rich means taking risks, being bold, seizing opportunities. But staying rich, that takes humility, fear, and a deep respect for how quickly things can unravel. Morgan Housel sums it up in one word: survival. Even legendary investors and powerful companies often fail because they forget that wealth is not a permanent state. It's fragile. Capitalism is cutthroat. Around 40% of public companies eventually lose all their value. The Forbes 400 list of richest Americans, roughly 20% turnover every decade from non-death related causes. So how do you survive in a financial world filled with uncertainty? Let's break it down into 3 key points, key principles. Prioritize being financially unbreakable. Yes, chasing a high return sounds exciting, but true wealth comes from the ability to stay in the game. Holding cash might seem boring, especially when stocks are booming, but that cash can prevent you from panic selling during a crash. And that one good decision can be more valuable than dozens of great stock picks. Compounding doesn't require sky-high returns, it requires time. You can only get the benefit of decades of growth if you survive the chaos in between. 2. Plan for your plan to not go as planned. Every financial plan seems solid until real life shows up. Think about the last 20 years, 9/11, the 2008 housing crisis, COVID-19, none of those were on anyone's spreadsheet. So build your plans with room for error. A margin of safety, be flexible, think long term. That's what turns a plan into a survival tool, not just a wish list. 3. Be optimistic about the future, but paranoid about the short term. It's not about thinking everything will go well. It's about believing that over time, things tend to improve, even if the journey is rocky. A mindset that both optimistic and paranoid might sound contradictory, but it's the only way to survive long enough to reap long-term rewards. The economy has improved dramatically over 170 years, but that progress happened alongside wars, recessions, disasters, and constant reasons to doubt. Staying wealthy means expecting setbacks, preparing for the worst, and trusting that progress still wins in the long run. Even Warren Buffett's success is rooted in this mindset. He didn't chase massive risk. He avoided debt, stayed calm through 14 recessions, and never tied himself to a single trend. He just kept showing up for decades, and that's what made his compounding unstoppable. Then there's Rick Gruren, a name few remember. He was investing alongside Buffett and Munger in the early days, equally talented, but he was in a hurry. When the market tanked in the 70s, Rick was forced to sell his Berkshire shares to Buffett at under $40 each. Why? He had bought too much. He didn't survive. So the lesson of this chapter is clear. Getting rich is a sprint. Staying rich is a marathon. And if you want to go the distance, you need resilience, humility, and a deep respect for the unknown. In the next chapter, we'll explore how people misjudge risk and how decisions around luck and randomness can shape everything from our finances to our future. Chapter 6. Tails, you win. You can be a wrong half and still make a fortune. I've been banging away at this thing for 30 years. I think the simple math is, some projects work and some don't. There's no reason to belabor either one, just get on to the next one. That's Brad Pitt in 2020 while accepting a Screen Actors Guild Award. Imagine this, you make 100 bets and only one pays off, but it pays off so massively that it covers all your losses and makes you rich. Welcome to the world of long tails, where just a few outliers drive nearly all success. This chapter is about something counterintuitive but crucial. In investing, business, and even careers, most things don't work, but the few that do can make all the difference. Take Heinz Berggruen, an art dealer who fled Nazi Germany. He amassed a huge collection of art, most of which wasn't worth much, but a small percentage. Picasso, Matisse, Braque, worth over $1 billion. That tiny sliver of success made him legendary. He didn't need to be right often, he just needed a few masterpieces. This is how venture capital works too. According to Correlation Ventures, out of over 21,000 investments, only 0.5% returned 50 times or more, and those few investments drove most of the entire industry's returns. But here's the twist. This isn't just how startups work. Even boring, blue-chip public companies follow the same pattern. Between 1980 and now, the Russell 3000 Index, a broad basket of US public companies, grew more than 73-fold. Yet 40% of the companies lost 70% of their value and never recovered. Almost all the index's gains came from just 7% of the companies. Think of names like Amazon and Apple. These giants have grown largely because of one or two breakout ideas. Amazon Prime and AWS, the iPhone. Tail events inside tail companies driven by tail careers. It's not that the rest failed completely, it's just they didn't move the needle. This principle also applies to your own behavior as an investor. Morgan Housel compares three hypothetical investors over 120 years. Sue, who invests every month no matter what. Jim, who avoids recession completely. And Tom, who hesitates during downturns. Sue wins. By staying the course during scary times, she ends up with 73% more wealth than Jim and Tom. Why? Because just a few moments, those rare panic periods, determine your long-term outcome. Your lifetime investing success may come down to how you behave during 1% of the time. When the market is in chaos, it's not about being a genius every day. It's about not panicking on the few days when everyone else does. This isn't just investing. It's business too. Take Amazon's Fire Phone, a total failure. But it doesn't matter, it's dwarfed by the massive success of AWS. Jeff Bezos even said, we're working on much bigger failures right now. And that's the point. Netflix has the same approach. CEO Reed Hastings once said, our hit ratio is too high, we need to take more risk, because more risk equals more chances at tails. The same goes for creatives. The Chris Rock you see on Netflix is a polished genius, but behind the scenes, he tests hundreds of jokes in small clubs, fumbling with notes and cutting what doesn't work. Only a few survive. Those are the tales that make it into the big shows. And even Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, has said he has made most of his money from just 10 investments out of hundreds. Charlie Munger echoed it. Remove a few top investments and Berkshire's track record is just average. We admire successes without seeing the graveyard of failures that paved the way. We assume the best are right all the time, but often they're wrong just as often as anyone else is. They're just more right when it counts. As George Soros put it, it's not whether you're right or wrong that matters. It's how much you make when you're right and how much you lose when you're wrong. So if things are going wrong, if your portfolio has some duds, if you've made bad calls, it doesn't mean you're failing. It might just mean your tail event hasn't shown up yet. Next up, how money and your relationship to it can actually make you happier. Don't miss it. Chapter 7. Freedom. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. What if the real goal of wealth isn't stuff, status, or even success? According to Morgan Housel, the highest form of wealth is simple: waking up and saying, I can do whatever I want today. Chapter 7 is about freedom, specifically control over your time. Because while happiness is the personal and complex, one thing holds the true across the board: people want to feel in control of their lives. That's the ultimate dividend money pays. It's more powerful than any luxury car, mansion, or paycheck. Psychologist Angus Campbell, in his 1981 study The Sense of Well-Being in America, discovered something fascinating. Wealth, geography, and education didn't predict happiness as much as one simple factor: a strong sense of control over your life. Not money, not title, not even health, just autonomy. Money gives you options, and options create peace of mind. A few $1,000s might let you take time off when you're sick. A modest emergency fund means you can walk away from a toxic job. More wealth might allow you to take a lower paying role that gives you more time with your family. And eventually, enough money means retiring when you want, not when you have to. These are real lifestyle upgrades, ones that no watch or car can compete with. Morgan shares a personal story. In college, he thought being an investment banker was the dream. The money, the status, it had to equal happiness, right? But then came the reality. Going home before midnight was a luxury. If you don't come in on Saturday, don't bother showing up on Sunday. And the job was exciting and paid well, but it owned every hour of his life, and even though he loved the work, he hated the lack of control. That's the paradox. Doing something you enjoy on someone else's terms can feel just as bad as doing something you hate. Psychologists call this phenomenon reactance. When you feel forced into something, even if it's good, your brain fights it. Jonah Berger puts it best: rather than feeling like they made the choice, they feel like we made it for them. And when that happens, even wealth can feel like a prison. Entrepreneur Derek Sivers tells a great story that brings this home. At 22, he lived frugally, saved $12,000, quit his job, and became a full-time musician. That's when his life changed. Not when he later sold the company and made millions, but when he bought freedom with a small cushion of cash. Here's the problem. We've become wealthier as society, but not happier. In 1955, median US income was $29,000 adjusted, but 2019 it had more than doubled. Homes are larger, cars are faster, gadgets are smarter. But surveys show that Americans report more stress and worry than ever, more than the global average. Why? Because while we've bought more things, we've lost control over our time. In the past, most jobs were hands-on: agriculture, crafts, manufacturing. You clocked out and left work behind. But now most of us work with our brains. We think for a living. And you can't clock out of your thoughts. That means work follows you home, in your head, on your phone, all day, every day. As writer Derek Thompson put it, the modern factory is not a place, it's the day itself. We're richer, but we feel like we're working 24/7. And if freedom is the key to happiness, it's no wonder we feel stuck. So what's the solution? It's different for everyone, but it starts with this truth. Nobody at the end of their life says, I wish I had more money to buy more stuff. In 30 Lessons for Living, Carl Pimer interviewed 1,000 elderly Americans. Not once said happiness came from income, status, or keeping up with the neighbors. What they valued was time with loved ones, meaningful relationships, and the freedom to enjoy life on their terms. So here's the real goal of money: not to impress, not to out-earn, not to even achieve, but to own your time, because controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. Next chapter, the exact opposite. One of the lowest dividend money pays. Stick around. Chapter 8. Man in the Car Paradox. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. Let's talk about Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and respect. Morgan Housel opens this chapter with a personal story. Working as a valet, driving some of the most exotic cars ever made. Ferraris, Rolls Royces, Bentleys, you name it. It was every car enthusiast's dream. But what he learned wasn't about horsepower or price tags. It was about human psychology. He noticed something strange. When people saw someone driving a luxury car, they weren't admiring the person. They were imagining themselves behind the wheel. Let that sink in. We think buying flashy things will make others admire us, but more often than not, they don't even see you. They see the car and picture themselves in it. It's what Morgan calls the man in the car paradox. We buy expensive things hoping to earn admiration, but those looking on are usually admiring the object, not the person. They're not thinking, wow, that person is so successful. They're thinking, wow, I would look amazing in that. This insight cuts deeper than just cars. Think about it. The mansion with 6 bedrooms, the diamond-studded watch, the designer outfits, all can draw attention, yes, but admiration, that's something different. Morgan reflects on a letter he wrote after the birth of his son. It reads, "You might think you want an expensive car, a fancy watch, and a huge house, but I'm telling you, you don't. What you want is respect and admiration, and you think those things will bring it. They almost never do, especially from the people you want it from most. That's the hard truth. We chase symbols of admiration instead of qualities that actually earn it. The lesson isn't to reject wealth or success, it's to recognize the subtle truth. Money can buy attention, but it can't buy admiration. Respect is earned through humility, kindness, and empathy, not engines and price tags. So the next time you're tempted to buy something flashy, ask yourself, are you trying to impress others, or are you hoping they'll admire you for something they're not even seeing?
Because in the end, horsepower fades and character lasts."
Chapter 9. Wealth is what you don't see. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. Let me tell you a story about expensive cars, admiration, and the illusions we live under. Morgan Housel once worked as a valet, parking the sleekest, shiniest cars money could buy. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces. Back then, he dreamed of owning one. Because to him, like many of us, the car wasn't just a machine, it was a signal that you've made it, that you're rich, that you're worth admiring. But here's the twist. While you obsessed over the car, you really noticed the person behind the wheel, and that's the paradox. People buy flashy things hoping others will admire them, when in reality, most people are only admiring the object and imagining themselves owning it. So why does this matter? Because money has a deep irony. True wealth is invisible. We often confuse being rich, having a high income, or driving a luxury car with being wealthy, which is actually the money you don't spend. Let's break it down. You see someone in a $100,000 car and assume they're doing well. But here's what you actually know about them. They have 100,000 less than before they bought the car, or 100,000 more in debt. That's it. We can't see bank accounts or investment portfolios, so we judge success by what's visible. Cars, clothes, homes, vacations. But most of these signs of spending, not saving. That's where real wealth hides, in the restraint, in the choices not taken, in the cars not purchased, in the upgrades decline, in the money quietly compounding behind the scenes. Morgan shares the story of Roger, a guy who drove a Porsche and looked like he had it all until it got repossessed. Why? Because he couldn't actually afford it. He wasn't wealthy, he just looked rich. And there are millions of Rogers out there. The truth is, being rich is easy to spot. It's loud, shiny, and visible. But being wealthy is quiet. It's the money you've saved, the options you've preserved, and the freedom you've built for the future. Singer Rihanna nearly went bankrupt after overspending, then sued a financial advisor. The advisor's response: was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you end up with the things and not the money? It sounds obvious, but it isn't. Most people say they want to be a millionaire, but what they often mean is they want to spend $1 million, and that's the opposite of being a millionaire. Here's a better definition. Wealth is the money you have not spent. It's not just the path to wealth, it's the very definition of it. Housel gives us a perfect analogy with health. Working out is like earning money. It makes you feel like you're making progress. But if you overeat after a workout, you erase that progress. True fitness comes from restraint, not taking the extra calories, just like wealth comes from not spending every rand or dollar you earn. Here's the problem. Wealthy people are hard to imitate. Because you don't see their success, you don't see their index funds, their retirement accounts, their modest homes. You see what they choose to show, and sometimes that's nothing at all. The media didn't praise Ronald Reagan until he passed away and left behind millions. While alive, no one saw him as a financial role model because his wealth was hidden. Imagine trying to learn how to write if you've never read a book. That's what trying to build wealth can feel like when all we see are rich people and never the wealthy ones. So what's the lesson? Be careful what success looks like to you. Understand the difference between rich and wealthy. Recognize that real financial strength lies in what's hidden, in savings, in discipline, in delayed gratification. Because at the end of the day, wealth is what you don't see. Chapter 10. Save money. The only factor you can control generates one of the only things that matters. How wonderful. Let me convince you to save money. Not for something flashy, just to save. Because surprisingly, most people fall into two groups. those who think they can't save, and those who think they don't need to. Morgan Housel starts this chapter with a simple truth. Wealth building isn't just about how much you earn or how well you invest, it's about how much you save, and that's completely within your control. He draws a parallel to the 1970s energy crisis. The world didn't avoid disaster by finding more oil. It got smarter. Cars, homes, factories became more efficient. In the same way, wealth can grow when we need less to live rather than just earning and investing more. Here's the powerful idea. Frugality and savings are like the energy efficiency of personal finance. Investment returns are uncertain. Saving money, on the other hand, gives you guaranteed results, more freedom, more options, and peace of mind. Wealth, Housel reminds us, is simply the leftovers after you spend less than you earn. You don't need a huge income to build wealth, but you must have a strong savings rate. Even if someone earns more, gets better returns than you, your ability to live happily on less gives you an edge. It creates a buffer. It multiplies the value of every dollar you do save. Compared to the millions of hours professionals spend trying to squeeze out an extra 0.1% return, the power of trimming lifestyle bloat is incredibly underrated. There's a psychological layer too. After your basic needs are met, the biggest threat to savings is your ego, the urge to show off, to keep up, to prove your worth through things. Housel says the best savers tend to care less about what others think. They spend with intention, not for validation. And here's something crucial. You don't need a specific reason to save. Not every dollar needs to be earmarked for a new car, a house, or retirement. Saving just to save is a form of self-defense, a hedge against uncertainty, because life has a habit of surprising us when we least expect it. Saving without a goal buys you time, space, and flexibility. The ability to say no, to change careers, to wait for the right moment, to make decisions on your terms. That's freedom. It's an invisible return, more valuable than compound interest. And in a world where competition is not global, where intelligence alone won't set you apart, flexibility becomes a rare advantage. Flexibility is what allows you to pivot, adapt, and thrive. It starts with savings. So save not just to buy something, save because it gives you power, peace, and options. In today's world, that's priceless. Chapter 11. Reasonable, rational. Aiming to be mostly reasonable works better than trying to be coldly rational. You are not a spreadsheet. You are a person, a deeply emotional, flawed, wonderful, irrational human being. And that's okay. When it comes to money, we often think we should aim to be coldly rational, optimize every decision, maximize every return. But Morgan Housel says that's not only unrealistic, it's not even the best goal. The goal instead is to be reasonable. And being reasonable means making financial decisions that make sense to you, given your emotions, your tolerance for risk, and your ability to sleep at night. To explain this, Housel shares a story about Julius Wagner Jaureg, a doctor who cured syphilis in the early 1900s by giving his patients malaria. Yes, you heard that right. He discovered that high fevers helped fight the disease, so he inducted fevers through controlled infections. The treatment was dangerous and painful, but it saved lives. He won a Nobel Prize for it, and yet, even today, when fevers are scientifically understood as part of the healing process, we still treat them as a problem, because they hurt, and people just want to stop hurting. The lesson: what's rational isn't always reasonable. In medicine and in money, people don't just want the best outcome. They want one they can live with. Take investing. The mathematically optimal portfolio must be loaded with risk in your younger years. Some studies even suggest using leverage, taking on debt to amplify returns, but most people wouldn't stomach that kind of volatility. They'd panic, pull out, and destroy the long-term plan. So what's the better strategy? One you actually stick with. Even the father of modern portfolio theory, Harry Markowitz, didn't follow his own math. He split his early investments 50-50 between stocks and bonds, not because it was optimal, but because it helped him minimize future regret. That's not irrational, that's reasonable. And this is a theme throughout money management. People prefer investing in local companies. It's not efficient, but it feels safer. People day trade or pick stocks not because it's wise, but because it scratches an emotional itch. People forecast the market, even though predictions are often wrong, because having some story about the future is comforting. And sometimes, like Jack Bogle investing in his son's high-fee funds, we just do things for love, not logic.
So here's the real takeaway. If you want financial success, build a plan you can live with, not just one that looks good in a textbook. It might be imperfect, it might be emotional, but if it helps you stay the course, it's not just reasonable, it's smart. Chapter 12. Surprise! History is the study of change, ironically used as the map of the future. In this chapter, we explore the unpredictable nature of financial history and why relying too heavily on the past can be a dangerous game. In Chapter 12, Morgan Housel confronts one of the most dangerous assumptions in finance, that history is a roadmap to the future. He opens with a striking quote by Stanford professor Scott Sagan. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. This simple truth challenges the way investors often rely on historical patterns to predict future outcomes. Housel makes a key distinction. While studying economic and investing history can help calibrate expectations and reveal behavioral trends, it should not be mistaken for a crystal ball. Many investors fall into what he calls the historians as prophets fallacy, the belief that past performance is a reliable indicator of what's to come. But unlike hard sciences like physics or geology, investing is shaped by the unpredictable behavior of people who are emotional, biased, and reactive. He cleverly echoes physicist Richard Feynman's quote, "Imagine how much harder physics would be if electrons had feelings," to drive home a powerful truth. Investing is not rational because humans are not rational. Emotions like fear and greed cloud judgment, making past behavior an unreliable predictor of future outcomes. One of the most important points Housel makes is that outliers, not averages, move the world. Economic history is driven not by normal, predictable events, but by rare and extreme ones. From world wars to tech revolutions, these tail events shape everything else. He notes how just a handful of people like Adolf Hitler, Bill Gates, and Martin Luther King dramatically changed the world. Similarly, a few massive events, 9/11, the Great Depression, the fall of the Soviet Union, set off chains of consequences that reshaped economies, governments, and generations. And because of how complex systems interact and compound over time, it's nearly impossible to connect the dots in advance. For example, Housel links the aftermath of 9/11 to the US housing crisis and the $1.6 trillion student loan problem, a chain reaction few could have foreseen. That's why the real lesson of history, he argues, is not that this will happen again, but the future will always contain surprises we didn't see coming. Another trap investors fall into is believing that experience equals foresight. But Housel reminds us that having been there, done that doesn't guarantee predictive insight. In fact, it often breeds overconfidence. Investor Michael Batnick explains that even seasoned investors can be dangerously anchored to past events, failing to adapt when the future unfolds differently. The second major point in this chapter is that structural changes make the past less relevant. The financial world evolves. Tools like the 401ks, both IRAs, and venture capital barely existed decades ago. Industries like tech dominate today's market, yet were almost non-existent 50 years ago. Public markets, accounting rules, and investor behavior have all changed. Housel illustrates this with Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing. While Graham's book, The Intelligent Investor, is timeless in wisdom, many of his actual formulas no longer work. That's because the market evolved. Graham himself revised and discarded his own rules across different editions of the book. He understood that what works changes with time, a lesson many modern investors forget. So what's the takeaway? Housel cautions against rigidly applying old data to new realities. It warns that economic models based solely on the past will fail in the face of unprecedented change. As Daniel Kahneman put it, the lesson we should learn from surprises is not, "I won't make that mistake again," but rather, "The world is difficult to anticipate." The chapter ends with a reminder that the most important economic events of the future will be surprises. They will have no historical precedent. And that's what makes them so impactful and so hard to prepare for. Instead of pretending we can perfectly predict the future, we should embrace the humility that comes with understanding just how unpredictable the world truly is. The past can teach us a lot, but it can't predict the future. What matters most are the surprises we can't yet imagine. Stay tuned for the next chapter as we continue unpacking the timeless lessons of money and human behavior. Chapter 13. Room for error. The most important part of every plan is planning on your plan not to go according to plan. In Chapter 13, we dive into a powerful principle that separates those who survive from those who don't in the financial world: the importance of room for error. You wouldn't expect one of the best examples of smart money management to come from a Las Vegas casino, but professional blackjack card counters offer a valuable lesson. Success depends not on perfect predictions, but on understanding odds and building a margin for error. These players know that no matter how skilled they are, any single hand can go against them. So they bet conservatively, not because they lack confidence, but because they understand that survival is the prerequisite to winning in the long run. This mindset is at the heart of what Housel calls room for error, an essential buffer that allows for randomness, bad luck, and unforeseen setbacks. It's humility practiced through financial planning. Gavin Lewis, a professional card counter portrayed in Bringing Down the House, put it best: even with a statistical edge, you might be able to withstand swings of bad luck. That's not caution, it's survival strategy. The same principle applies with investing. The world of finance is not one of certainties, it's one of probabilities. Yet people often act like the future is knowable. They make plans assuming best-case scenarios, set rigid targets, and often ignore the possibility that something could go wrong. That mindset is dangerous. Benjamin Graham called this buffer the margin of safety. His famous quote, "The purpose of the margin of safety is to render the forecast unnecessary," captures the essence of wise planning. If your plan only works under ideal conditions, it's a bad plan. A good plan works across a range of possible outcomes. That's what gives it staying power. Unfortunately, room for error is often seen as a lack of confidence or unnecessary conservatism. But in reality, it's the opposite. It's a form of strength. It lets you stay in the game long enough for favorable odds to play out. Investing rewards patience, and patience is only possible if you can survive volatility, financially and emotionally. People love certainty. Forecasts are presented with pinpoint precision, not probability ranges. We believe will be the exception to the rule. Studies show we even assume our own home renovation projects will stay on budget, even though we expect other people's to go over. This kind of overconfidence blinds us to the value of room for error. Room for error doesn't mean avoiding risk. It means not taking risks that can wipe you out. It means balancing optimism with the ability to enjoy. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates both practice this principle. Buffett pledged to always run Berkshire Hathaway with ample cash. Gates insisted on keeping enough money in Microsoft's bank to fund a full year of payroll without revenue. That kind of buffer isn't excessive, it's responsible. Room for error isn't just a spreadsheet concept, it's psychological too. A 30% market dip may be survivable mathematically, but emotionally it can break your confidence. That emotional fallout can lead to your poor decisions. Selling at the bottom, quitting too early. You need a margin not just for financial volatility, but for emotional turbulence that follows it. Even if history suggests average returns of 6.8%, Housel personally assumes his future returns will be 1/3 lower. Why? Because he'd rather be surprised to the upside than devastated by the unexpected downside. That's his margin of safety. The chapter also tackles what Housel calls the Russian relay mindset, relying on the good odds even when the downside is catastrophic. It can be a risk taker and still be highly sensitive to the risk of ruin. The 2008 financial crisis made this clear. Those who were highly leveraged didn't just lose money, they lost the opportunity to recover. The key is to avoid single points of failure, dependencies that, if broken, can take everything down with them. These risks don't always come in predictable forms. Housel shares stories from startups he worked with, which were derailed by unexpected problems. From burst pipes to mental breakdowns, none of these risks were in anyone's plans. That's the point. You can't predict everything. What you can do is avoid building a fragile system that breaks under stress. Redundancy, optionality, and savings, even without a clear purpose, are not efficiencies. They're insurance against life's surprises. Think of savings not just for planned expenses, but for the financial equivalent of mice chewing through your tank's electrical system. Something ridiculous, unexpected, and incredibly disruptive. In the end, the most important part of any plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan. It's the difference between those who enjoy and those who don't. Room for error isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. In a world of uncertainty, it's what allows you to stay in the game long enough to win. In the next chapter, we'll explore why you will change over time and how that affects every financial decision you make. Chapter 14. You will change. Long-term planning is harder than it seems because people's goals and desires change over time. In this chapter, we dive into the illusion of long-term planning and why expecting your future self to stay the same might be the greatest risk of all. Chapter 14. The End of History Illusion. Imagine dedicating your life to a goal only to realize once you achieve it, that's not what you wanted after all. That's exactly what happened to one of Morgan Housel's childhood friends. Against all odds, this friend worked relentlessly to become a doctor. He didn't come from privilege or have natural academic brilliance, but he bulldozed his way through every obstacle. When Housel finally reconnected with him, expecting joy and fulfillment, he was instead met with pure disappointment. Awful career, his friend kept saying. This story is a powerful reminder we're not just bad at predicting the future, we're even worse at predicting who will become in the future. This is the heart of the end of history illusion, a psychological tendency where we recognize how much we've changed in the past, but underestimate how we'll change going forward. We make life-changing financial decisions assuming today's version of ourselves will remain the same, but our desires, goals, and values often evolve, sometimes drastically. The dream job we pursue in our 20s may become a burden in our 30s. The lavish lifestyle we worked so hard to afford may lose its appeal. Meanwhile, decisions made by our younger selves about careers, spending, or saving can trap us in a version of life we no longer want. Housel illustrates this simple example. A boy who dreams of driving a tractor. As he matures, that dream changes, perhaps to law school, then to corporate work, and eventually to staying home to care for a family. Each transition brings a shift in values, but the financial plans tied to each phase often fail to keep up. It's no wonder so many people hit retirement unprepared or live with regret about how they spent their youth. The data backs it up. Only 27% of college grads work in a field related to their major. Nearly 30% of stay-at-home parents have college degrees. Life changes, and so do we. So what's the solution? Housel gives two key ideas. First, avoid extremes in financial planning, whether it's embracing a life of minimalism or endlessly chasing wealth. Going too far either direction increases the change of regret. Whether it's embracing a life of minimalism or endlessly chasing wealth, going too far in either direction increases the chance of regret. Extremes may look satisfying in the short term, but they often leave long-term scars. The middle path. Moderate saving, moderate work, moderate leisure. Give us the resilience to adapt as we change. Second, embrace change. Accept that who you are today may not be who you will be in 10 years from now. Staying loyal to past decisions simply because that's what I chose leads to stagnation. Financial plans should evolve with you, not bind you. Clinging to sunk costs, the time, the effort, and money already spent, can lock you into an outdated version of yourself. Jason Zweig, writing about his collaboration with Daniel Kahneman, tells a revealing story. Kahneman had an uncanny ability to throw out entire drafts and start afresh, as if the previous version never existed. His mindset, I have no sunk costs. That single phrase holds immense power, especially in personal finance. It gives you permission to walk away from old goals and pivot to what matters now. The real key to long-term success, financial or otherwise, is endurance, and endurance is only possible when your plans leave room for change. Housel suggests viewing life not as one 80-year journey, but as 4 20-year chapters. Each chapter may demand a new approach. By planning for change and refusing to be trapped by outdated goals, we give ourselves the freedom to thrive, not just survive. It's not just the world that changes, it's you. The sooner you accept it, the better. Your financial decisions will serve your future self. In the next chapter, we'll explore the price of compounding and why it demands more than just time. Chapter 15. Nothing's free. Everything has a price, but not all prices appear on labels. Now we're diving into another key chapter of this book. Let's unlock the next big idea. Chapter 15. The price of success. Everything in life has a price, and when it comes to money and investing, the price is rarely marked with a clear tag. It's hidden in stress, uncertainty, and the pain of watching things go south. And the real trick, being willing to pay that price, even when you don't recognize you're paying for it. Morgan Housel opens with a story of General Electric, a corporate giant that fell from grace. At its peak, GE was worth more than $1/3 trillion. Then came the 2008 financial crisis. The GE's empire started to crumble. CEO Jeff Immelt became the scapegoat, but he reminded the world, every job looks easy when you're not the one doing it. What most people don't see is the invisible cost of leadership, of decision-making under pressure, of navigating chaos. Just like investing easy from the sidelines, brutal in the trenches. This invisible cost applies to the markets too. From 1950 to 2019, the Dow Jones returned around 11% annually. Great, right? But the cost wasn't in dollars. It was in the emotion and endurance. Surviving crashes, riding out uncertainty, and resisting panic. That's the price. And just like buying a car, you have three choices. Pay full price, accept volatility, settle for less, low return assets, or try to cheat the system, market timing. And like car theft, trying to get returns without paying the price often leads to punishment. Most investors do try to cheat. They trade too much, chasing timing strategies, and end up underperforming the very funds they invest in. Why? Because volatility feels like a fine, like a punishment, but it's not. It's free. And once you see that, everything changes. Fees are part of life. Disneyland costs $100, but people pay because the experience is worth it. Investing works the same way. If you want high returns, you pay with patience, resilience, and ability to endure drawdowns. No one enjoys losing 20% of their money, but if you view that job as a fee instead of a fine, you can stick around long enough to win. And sometimes the fee doesn't feel worth it. Sometimes it rains at Disneyland, but it's still better than never showing up because you fear the clouds. Successful investing isn't about avoiding pain. It's about realizing that pain is part of the process. It's the price of admission, so find the price, then pay it. If this lesson hit home, be sure to listen to the next chapter. Keep learning, keep growing. Chapter 16. You and me. Beware taking financial cues from people playing a different game than you are. In this chapter, Morgan explores a dangerous trap that affects us all, chasing returns in a game we don't even realize we're playing. Let's get into it. Chapter 16. You and me. Financial bubbles. They wrecked economies, destroyed wealth, and left deep scars on millions of people's lives. But despite the devastation, we keep seeing them over and over again. Why? Most people blame greed. But Morgan Housel argues there's something much more subtle at play, something we often miss entirely. The truth is, financial bubbles aren't always the result of pure irrationality. Often they emerge when investors take cues from others. People are actually playing a completely different game, and that's where the chaos begins. Let's break it down. Imagine 4 people looking at the same stock. One's investing for retirement in 30 years, another plans to sell in 10. A third wants to flip it in a year, and the last is a day trader looking to cash out by lunchtime. All 4 could justify paying very different prices for the exact same asset, because their goals and time frames are widely different. During the dot-com bubble, for example, Yahoo stock soared to dizzying heights. To long-term investors, the valuation seemed insane, but for short-term traders, those high prices made perfect sense. They were just looking for a quick profit, not a decade-long run. This is where momentum comes in. Short-term traders chase quick wins, and as prices rise, more people jump in. The bubble grows. Soon, short-term players dominate the market, and their behavior sets prices. Not fundamentals, not logic, but speed. That's how long-term investors get swept up in games they never intended to play. The same pattern unfolded during the housing bubble. People weren't buying homes to raise families, they were flipping properties for quick cash. In just a few years, house flipping in the US exploded 5-fold. These flippers didn't care about long-term affordability or income growth. They only cared that the price next month would be higher than it is today, and for a while it was. Here's the danger. When long-term investors let short-term traders set the tone, they start to believe prices that don't make sense for their game. They mimic behavior that works for others without realizing those others have completely different goals, incentives, and timelines. This confusion doesn't just affect investing. It impacts how we spend, save, and live. We copy people's lifestyles without understanding the circumstances or what game they're playing. A flashy car might make sense for someone chasing status in a cutthroat industry, but not for you. If you model your decisions on their behavior, you risk financial and emotional disappointment. The solution: clarity. You have to know your game, identify your time horizon, know your personal goals. Once you've done that, tune out the noise from people playing a different one. When someone on TV says, buy the stock, stop and ask, are they playing your game? Probably not. Housel shares his own simple mission statement. I am a passive investor optimistic in the world's ability to generate real economic growth, and I'm confident that over the next 30 years that growth will accrue to my investments. The statement acts as a shield, a filter, helping him ignore market noise that's irrelevant to his long game. The big lesson in chapter 16 is this: don't blindly copy what others are doing. They're probably not even playing the same game as you. In a world where everyone has different timelines, different risks, and different goals, your greatest asset is self-awareness. This should help the game you're playing with money. In the next chapter, we're diving into the power of pessimism, staying intentional, stay focused, and play your own game. Chapter 17. The Seduction of Pessimism. Optimism sounds like a sales pitch. Pessimism sounds like someone trying to help you. In this chapter, we uncover why pessimism grabs headlines while optimism builds the world quietly in the background. For reasons I have never understood, people like to hear that the world is going to hell. That quote from historian Deirdre McCloskey sets the tone for this chapter because, as Morgan Housel argues, pessimism isn't just more common than optimism, it's more appealing. Here's the irony. Optimism is often the better bet. Progress happens, the world tends to improve. But pessimism sounds smarter. It feels more analytical, more serious, more aware of risk. It captures attention in a way that sunny confidence really does. But let's clear up one thing. Real optimism isn't blind or naive. It doesn't mean believing everything will be great. Real optimism is the belief that over time things tend to work out, despite the inevitable setbacks along the way. Yet in finance, media, and culture, it's the doom and gloom forecast that steal the spotlight. Like in 2008, when the Wall Street Journal ran a front-page article predicting that the United States would break into 6 separate nations, that headline wasn't on a fringe blog. It was printed in the most prestigious financial paper in the world. But imagine if someone had written an article in Hawthorne, Japan in 1946 predicting that within a generation, Japan would become a global economic superpower with booming life expectancy, thriving exports, and strong US alliances. They would have been laughed out of the room, yet it happened. So why does pessimism win? Because it feels urgent, it feels important. Say the stock market will crash and people listen. Say it'll rise and people tune out. Part of this is psychological. As Daniel Kahneman noted, we're hardwired to fear loss more than we appreciate gain. Evolution taught us that avoiding danger is a better survival tactic than chasing opportunity. In finance, this means we overreact to risk, to decline, to any signal of threat. Another reason is that pessimism hits everyone. When the weather is bad in Florida, most Americans don't care, but when the economy tanks, everyone pays attention. Stocks falling 1% get bold red headlines, but a 1% gain barely noticed. Then there's the storytelling problem. Setbacks are sudden, progress is slow. A stock crash or a corporate scandal grabs attention, but compounding growth, the true driver of long-term wealth, happens so gradually it's easy to overlook. That rates from heart disease fell over 70% since 1965, saving hundreds of thousands of lives every year, yet that doesn't dominate headlines the way a natural disaster or terror attack does. Progress demands patience. Destruction delivers drama. That's why pessimism gets the spotlight, while optimism quietly builds the future. And when it comes to financial markets, pessimism often stems from assuming the present trend will just continue. But markets adapt. People innovate, like when oil was forecasted to run out and then fracking changed the game. Threat sparks solutions, but pessimists rarely account for that. One more reason pessimism seduces us. It lowers expectation. Stephen Hawking, paralyzed at 21, once said, "My expectations were reduced to 0. Everything since then has become a bonus." When you expect the worst, anything better feels like a win. The psychological trick makes pessimism emotionally comforting, even when it's not rational. So what's the takeaway here? Understand the pull of pessimism, respect it, but don't let it control your view of the future. In money and in life, the long-term trend is growth. Slow, steady, and easy to overlook, but powerful beyond measure. If you found value in this chapter, that sharpens your mind and your money. Next up, we look at how stories shape our financial decisions and how powerful narratives can cloud clear thinking. Stay grounded, stay learning, don't be seduced by pessimism. Chapter 18. When you will believe anything. Appealing fictions and why stories are more powerful than statistics. Imagine this. An alien circles Earth, trying to understand the global economy. From 30,000 feet, nothing seems different in 2009 compared to 2007. Same buildings, same cities, even better technology. But when he looks at the numbers, $16 trillion in lost household wealth, 10 million jobs gone, he's baffled. What changed? This is the essence of Chapter 18. The economy runs on stories, not just stuff. And when those stories shift, everything shifts, even if the fundamentals stay the same. The narrative economy. The 2008 crisis didn't destroy factories, erase knowledge, or wipe out workers. It destroyed belief. a belief that housing prices always go up, banks were stable, and financial markets could manage risk. Once that story collapsed, everything else spiraled. Unlike physical destruction, like Germany in 1945 or Japan's demographic crisis, 2008 was a narrative damage, and that kind of damage is invisible, but no less powerful. Appealing fictions. We are hardwired to believe stories, especially ones we want to be true. When the stakes are high and our control is limited, we cling to just about anything that promises certainty. In investing, that often means financial snake oil, TV predictions, the next Warren Buffett, or the Ponzi schemes like Bernie Madoff. Why? Because the upside financial freedom, a 10 times return, is so enormous that even a 1% chance feels worth chasing. Room for error is the antidote. The more you crave an outcome, the more important it is to build a buffer between your hopes and what actually needs to happen for you to be okay. That's true in personal finance and policy making alike. All of us, like a 1-year-old child, create mental models based on limited information. We think we know what's going on, but our understanding is stitched together with guesses, biases, and imagination. History isn't safe either. It's not just a list of facts, it's curated, interpreted, and often bent to reinforce what we already believe. We tell ourselves stories to make sense of uncertainty. That's not weakness, it's survival, but it also means our financial decisions are often based less on math and more on myth. Here are 2 takeaways. 1. The more you want something to be true, the more susceptible you are to believing shaky stories. That's why financial fictions thrive. They promise control in a chaotic world. 2. Everything sees an incomplete version of reality, but we act like our personal version is the full truth. That's dangerous when making decisions based on forecasts, because the world isn't a clean equation. It's messy, uncertain, and deeply human. That alien hovering over Times Square is not wrong because he's dumb. He's wrong because he doesn't know the story changed. And in finance, as in life, stories are everything. They shape how we feel, what we fear, and where we go next. Understanding that makes you not just a better investor, but more grounded human being. Chapter 19. All together now. What we've learned about psychology of your own money. We're closing in on the financial lessons from the book. This chapter is like a final checklist. A simple, clear, and personal collection of truths about how to handle money better. Let's get into it. Congratulations, you've made it this far in the book. Morgan Housel now offers you not just one story, but a series of short, powerful lessons to take you with. But first, a disturbing story from 1931. A dentist visit that went terribly wrong. Clarence Hughes went in with a toothache. Hours later, he woke up missing 16 teeth and his tonsils. A week later, he was dead. The problem wasn't just the surgery. It was that Clarence never consented to it. Back then, doctors believed they knew best, and that was enough. But medicine changed. It began recognizing that every patient had unique values, goals, and thresholds for risk. That change was driven by one truth. Even experts can't decide what's best for someone without knowing what they value. And here's where Housel draws the connection. Money works the same way. There is no universal right answer in finance. A financial advisor, like a doctor, can give you knowledge, but they can't tell you what matters most to you. Your goals, your emotions, your time horizon, that's personal. So instead of giving rigid advice, Housel shares guiding principles, universal truths that you can apply in your own way. Stay humble when things go right, and show compassion when they go wrong. The world is messy. Luck and risk are always at play. Respect both. Less ego, more wealth. Wealth is what you don't see. The money you don't spend. That gap between income and ego is where wealth grows. Manage money in a way that helps you sleep at night. That might mean being ultra-conservative or ultra-aggressive. Either is fine, as long as you can live with it. The single most powerful force in investing, time. Extend your time horizon, and you can gain the ability to let luck average out and compound growth take over. Be okay with things going wrong. You can be wrong often and still win big, because a small number of successes will usually account for most of your outcomes. Use money to gain control over your time. That's the highest return on investment there is. Be nice. Be modest. Flashy things impress fewer people than you think. Respect and admiration are more often earned through humility. Just save. You don't need a specific reason. Save for the unknown, because life always finds a way to surprise you. Know the cost of success. Doubt, risk, regret. These are the fees, not fines. They're part of the process, not mistakes to avoid. Worship room for error. Safety nets and buffers let you stay in the game long enough for the magic of compounding to work. Avoid extremes. Your goals will evolve, and extreme decisions often age poorly. Take risks, but never the ones that can wipe you out. Risk pays off over time, but ruin ends the game forever. Play your own game. Don't copy someone who's playing by different rules. define your own version of success, and finally, respect the mess. There's no single right answer in finance. Smart people can disagree, that's okay. That wraps up chapter 19, a sharp, clear set of takeaways to guide your financial thinking for life. Money isn't just math, it's emotions, goals, fear, dreams, and trade-offs. And only you can define what success looks like. If this resonated with you, be sure to check out the next and final chapter. Chapter 20, Confessions, the Psychology of Money. Housel opens the curtain and shows us how he actually manages his own money. Not just what he says in theory, but what he lives in practice. Let's get into it. Sandy Gottsman, a billionaire investor, asks one question in interviews. What do you own and why? Not what you think is smart, not what stocks look cheap, just what are you doing with your own money? Because theory is one thing, but what you do with your actual dollars, that reveals what really matters to you. The same goes for doctors. In a widely shared essay called How Doctors Die, we learn that doctors often choose less aggressive treatments for themselves than they recommend to patients. Why? Because decisions change when they're personal, and the same applies to money. So Housel takes this chapter to share, here's what works for me. How his family thinks about saving. The goal, not to be rich, not to impress, but to be independent. To wake up every day and know that his family can do what they want, when they want, with who they want. That's the real prize. His parents modeled this. His father became a doctor later in life, worked hard, saved aggressively, and one day just walked away from a high-stress ER career because he was rich, because he had freedom. Inspired by that, Housel and his wife made a pact early on. Keep their lifestyle simple, stable, and unchanging. Even as income rose, their spending didn't. That gap between income and lifestyle became their independence fund. Most importantly, they stopped moving the goalpost. A lifestyle that felt decent in their 20s still feels comfortable now. They don't feel deprived because their values are aligned. The kind of mental discipline builds wealth faster than a high salary ever could. They even bought their house cash. Financially irrational? Sure, but psychologically it gave them peace of mind. No mortgage, no payments, no stress. It's not the best financial decision, Housel admits, but it's the best money decision we've ever made. And they keep 20% of their assets in cash, way above what most advisors would recommend. Why? Because cash is freedom. It means never being forced to sell stocks in a downturn. It means being prepared for whatever curveball life throws next. As Charlie Munger put it, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. That's the game plan. How his family thinks about investing. Housel started as a stock picker, 25 individual companies at a time, but over the years his strategy evolved. Now, it's all low-cost index funds, simple, automated, long-term. He doesn't hate active investing, he just believes play the odds, and for most people, indexing has the highest probability of success. It's not exciting, but it works. And here's the thing, he's okay not being the best investor in the world because he can't afford to be a bad one. If simple indexing, steady contributions, and long-term patience help him reach all his goals, why complicate it? Today, almost their entire net worth is made up of three things. A fully paid off house, a checking account, a few broad market Vanguard index funds. That's it. No magic tricks, no high frequency trades, no secret sauce. And it makes one financial final point. Most people think investment returns are about how hard you work at it. But in reality, the world is driven by tails. A few big events or habits like saving consistently, avoiding big mistakes, and letting compounding do its thing matter far more than anything else. So what's the big takeaway from this final chapter? Do what works for you, not what looks smart on paper, not what impresses people at parties, not what others say is optimal. The real mastery of money isn't math, it's psychology. If your plan helps you sleep well at night and builds your future without regret, then you already won. That's the heart of the psychology of money, and that wraps up our full journey through this powerful book. If this series helped shift how you think about money, consider subscribing for more transformative book summaries that turn reading into real-life results. Until next time, stay focused, stay patient, keep building.